All right then. So topic of today is going to be streamlining Revit. And particularly in this case, we're using it so that we are reviewing workflows that goes from Revit, Navisworks to class detection until the tools we're using for AI. A brief introduction about that is I'm Director of AI and Innovation in Leap. I have more than 98 courses on Udemy of workflows working around construction, management, Dynamo, working around within C# developments and set, and 28,000 students worldwide with over 15 years of experience. So that will be a little of my background on this topic being relevated. And as well, I'm going to show you how it integrates with everything we're going to see on today's chat. Cool. So first of all, introducing Leap. And Leap is a consulting technology about AI, consulting firm about technology and AI. And this is just a snapshot of spaces we have presence in. So there are multiple spots working around. What do Leap does is that it has three main core components, which is the digital practice, that it's digital practice type of projects working around with AI-powered BIM, BDC management, and other types of solutions. The second spot is about digital solutions, working on automations, integrations, the use of application and platform development, and AI-powered solutions for the eco industry. And the last set of that one is the use of solutions integrated with smart digital twins using BIM, IoT, and artificial intelligence with that one. This is just a brief snapshot of the clients we have worked with. And to put that in reference, everything we're going to see today, it's the efforts being gathered around class detection and how those get into workflows of AI, workflows of how to make it faster and how to work it better. So I'm trying just to find the chat because I'm not seeing the chat. Just a moment. Okay, if there's anything around, it'll just pop it up. So the agenda, first we're going to start with class coordination workflows and some references, how that workflow works around, how it's out of the box, how it gets better. Then we will go with some commercial AI and considerations. Then we're going to review Leap tools for AI integration, how we're grasping all those management elements so that they get integrated into AI, and as well future of developments for AI integration. So starting from scratch, class coordination. There's an initial reference that has been a class that I gave on 2019 on Autodesk University that I was called Accelerated Class Coordination. In that case, the scope was just getting into elements being displayed on models, how they were just fixing things, and as well the reference is there. I mean, we can have it on the chat. Yeah, I found the chat. Thank you very much. So within that reference, you can also copy the link and review it. I mean, that's part of as well. But just to give an overview and we have the same understanding, we're going to introduce class detection. So class detection is the process when you're having different disciplines or when you're doing model coordination. And you find spot where you have some issues that needs to be solved beforehand going into construction or fabrication. It's one of the main, I will say that one of the main BIM uses that has aimed for a lot of projects to start using BIM on a long time ago. And right now it's just part of the workflow. Notes from that one is that it becomes model coordination if it's the projects going on the design stages, because in that case, it's not that it's a clash, it's just part of the process. But when it comes into class detection, it's just because the design has already been done, and when they're getting everything integrated, then we get some conflicts that might be arising, and we want to avoid them so that they won't happen. So before going into any of those processes, two things that we need to consider properly is that we have to have proper scope on the level of detail of elements so that to know if we're catching on a low grain detail of how elements get intersected, if there's going to be some issue within those being very specific or if they're on a general matter, right? It's not the same thing to do it on a feasibility analysis than doing it for a construction ready project. And as well, it will depend on how much is the requirement for that on the level of construction. Another setting as well, it will be that the proper team integration. If communication channels are not properly taken care of, model coordination or clash detection can become very complicated. So those two things need to be handled beforehand, everything else, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. There are people on the waiting room, right? We're just gonna accept them. Correct. So out of the box clash detection. So we have here video that overall the process. So normally you will need to have your files, you will need to get it extracted, downloaded. In this case, we're using Revit, but the same thing will apply if we're using IFC models, if you're using any other type of elements. And we need to be ensuring that the geometry, the properties, or the characteristics of the specific elements are visible. That way we know that we are not doing just clash detection to any object, but just the ones that are relevant, such as the structural elements, MAP connectors, MAP types of objects. Therefore, as well, if the walls are being pre-assembled or they are already separately casted, they need to be taken care of because otherwise elements can be having some issues. If we're having some analysis between the ceilings, the type of floors, the rooms, those might get into consideration because we need to properly export it in order to review it, right? On the sample we're looking, it's from a project being using from different specialties, having some plumbing, MEP, having some structural architectural. And within those, we can see here a process of exporting, which will lead into having the files being handled outside of a system. And within that one as well, needed to have it on a shared same system coordination, right? I mean, some things that we mostly take for granted when we're using ACC or when we're using like services that gather everything on a common data environment, but it's still depending on how things are integrated, data should have the same spots and the same type of objects. So let's go into a little detail about it. Then going into Navisworks, probably if we want to review it properly, we need to have elements being changed on color, elements having their own sets so that we know we're checking these objects that are structural, elements that are already like being MEPs, being conduits, being for sanitary installations. And once we have those, we'll still need to check if the properties are already set within the proper geometry, because we want to check that they have, like, depending if they can be within any type of openings or connections, or if they are just being thrown together. So in that case, we're using just a general clash. Then once we have them, we will have a lot of clashes because all objects that are having an intersection will be found. And that's when it becomes more complicated, because if we're trying to review it, we will need to have it on a board, checking, having with a meeting room, reviewing by priorities and finding where are those spots to be fixed. And that might become very complicated because in that case, we need to have a leverage system or a priority. So things that can be done from that perspective is just getting an export, getting specific elements as visibility, exporting them back into Revit, reviewing those objects so that we know where are the spots of intersection, and then fixing everything around. But still, we're seeing from this process a long time consuming for reviewing things that are happening. So we're thinking about here exporting files to 2 to 7 minutes file, selection of features having to 1 to 4 minutes. If we already have the selection set, so we have a good practice of how to work it around, we can repeat those workflows. And at the end, having all of the objects without any type of noting, will go into 30 to 10,000 clashes. I mean, it can go very, very high. Even though if we do some selective clashes and say like, okay, let's find the knots or where are the spots that they have, like a lot of elements being intersected, we can go on a low level, but still it will be long time consuming. Then we can compare it to the solution of Autodesk Construction Cloud going on a second level. On a second level, in that case, what happens is that you're actually not needed to export the things, but just need to be clear on a three-dimensional view that they have the elements you want to compare. When they are getting charged, they're having the same things on the forge viewer, on the model viewer. And when you're getting those to be intersected, you just need to grasp them. I mean, that will decreases the time of files being exported and the files to be added. So that takes Navisworks from the question. But still, if you're reviewing elements or you want to have it around, we will need to have some elements. So just checking that we have, have people on the waiting room. No, I think everyone is already in there. So we see here that there are 252 conflicts that they are changing. We have visibility, we have web services, but how do we assign them? How do we leverage those so that we don't have it? We need to have to place incidences on the ACC, and that case we're still far from that one to be connected on a streamlined process. So it's loading time has been decreased, it works, but it still needs reviews and changes. Their approach is now we're using some Dynamo because we want to test how we extract that information and create it in objects. And in that case, we have still the files being exported, the selection of features, but we can export them on an XML format because we know the points and we got the location so that we can recreate the objects. And we have something like this in which it will just, come on, just trying to, yeah. So we can read an object, a type of library, which is having the parameters, and it can create the sphere. So that in that case, we're going back into Revit. So now we can just fix and as well know where they are. And because of that, we can also have a lot of elements, but still being a lot, it requires some specific analysis so that the ones that are closer will find us to have the concurrence points. And with those, we can just find like, okay, this is a spot we need to tackle first. We can give priorities. We can solve these features so that they go better on that workflow. And as well, changing colors so that we can know like which are the elements that are integrated and set it around. So all of these workflows working within Dynamo, they are as well within that previously set Autodesk University class. And at this point, we're looking at where they are intersecting, if they are closer enough, how can we tackle them so that they become bigger? How do we get some sheets within those sheets being created so that we have specific elements to be assigned on sheets and knowing what's happening with them? Still, within this process, it's useful because now we have a way of knowing where are the clashes, how we can tackle it, how we can fix them, how they can solve it. But still, we're thinking that we're having a lot of documents happening. We have a lot of things that are not completely streamlined because they need to have some analysis and some elements. And as well, it will require those to be managed and processed, right? So let me go for the next one. So we're having a reading of the format, then getting created and getting the objects. Getting some analysis data so that we know where they are, where's the grids, where's the information they're holding, and how things are getting on the same sheets. So I'm going to leave this one for a moment, and as well, these ones will be shared. This is how the references of courses of how to do all these processes, because that's like our starting point. So from this introduction, now we can get into some deeper analysis on how to streamline it. So let's start by the Avant Tools approach. So within this Avant Tools approach, what we're doing is we're gathering all those requirements and just coding it on a DLL. So that DLL can integrate with our tools of AI. So the way it works is has a ribbon that it's on the top, and that ribbon, what it does is actually having a set directly that it's reading the categories. Yeah. That it's reading the categories so that it can get specific document, creating the type of project and the building selector. Within this idea, we're adding that data so that it gets into a specific space on a server under the computer, and that way it can be queried back so that way it's a way of learning how it's working. Then we also have some protocol sets that are using categories from Revit so that it's still curated for getting in between structure, architecture, getting objects from MAPs, and the result product is just like that. Just by creating the workflow, it's creating already where are the classes depending on the protocol being created, and setting up those spheres within the elements that are getting together. So that breaks the gap because you don't need to load anything. You're just working on Revit using the same collaborative files. And within those, you're finding the spots where they are added. But the good thing about this one is that it's still within all those spheres, they have the information that they are requiring. They know specifically what's the group, where are the elements that are colliding, if they are multiple disciplines or if they are within the size of whatever it's getting intersected, and as well within the tools, they can get grouped. So that in that case, we can go priorities for the objects, looking at Revit and fixing it if it's something fixable on that matter. If it's not, still it can be shared upon the CD environment, the common data environment, and as well grouped it so that it will work with other elements. So some other features from that is that they are coded so that they know all the information. All the classes that are being created do not need to export because they already have a JSON file. And you will see within the AI tools that we have, that we are working with, that help us so that when we're reading information back, we're actually having where to tackle it from. Some samples of that one, getting those being solved, how they get within annotations, and as well, how do they get within the, all the proper data being coded. I will say that one of the processes from that is just having everything on a sorted manner so that we can just query back and read it so that it keeps on growing. Yeah, and all of those objects have their own information so that in that case, everything is queryable, it's inside of the object, and it's repeatable within the next requirements it might have. So having it from there, advantages we have by using this setting of tool is that we have already cut a lot of time on the creation of objects. We're having a spot where we can get within the same size and shapes. We're also getting the data being saved and stored so that in that case, we're reusing it and we can have an historical data from the same project within a local or a server type of solution. And we have all the JSON data being displayed so that it's easy, it's going to be easy to read. Then let's go into commercial AI solutions approach. And then from the AI type of perspective, there's a lot of solutions for different type of services. I mean, this is just a snapshot of those that we have considered around for getting services integrated. Then we have the main settings we set for strategic questions to validate commercial AI tools that we have, like we need to know where the data training comes from, if it's from a democratic type of process or if it goes from a local type of service. The clear definitions of data sources and the size that we're using, because in that case we know how the responses are going to affect the incremental relational connection, so that each time we're having a new result and we're adding something else, it gets bigger and bigger, and that would make much more accurate responses. It gets improved over time so that it goes fine-tuning or it goes within specific approaches so that we can ensure it's appropriate. The privacy protection so that it's not being vulnerable within how you're working with others. And as well that the infrastructure can get nurtured so that you can have it on your own installation facilities. So talking about that, I'm presenting Andiamo. Andiamo right now it's available on our webpage. And as far as now, let me show you what Andiamo does. It works it's going through a virtual assistant, having some data extraction from applications, data on the model, and data from different types of documents. It gets trained within the review of semantics so that it knows like, oh, you're thinking about something like this. Probably I will need to go into a deeper review of the tools that I have and how do I answer. It can work from Q&A for questions and answers. And as well within that one, the last part of the road going for the access data that you have already stored to be retrieved on the future. So some review of Andiamo. This one is using document support so that if you have any type of document and if you're reading like the JSON file we have from the class detection, it can also help you around it, but you can use it for different types of documents, for geographical information, for PDFs, for bylaws, for type of document of the BEP. Then as well, working around from some questions, you can ask what's the files for. In this case, we're using a CSV file. Also, like you receive a file from someone and you can say like, okay, tell me what is this about? What do I need? Or how do I work with it? And it can help you solve within like, oh, this is a file for clashes, or this is a file from locations, or this is a file from types of walls you may have on your project, but you are not already adding it to it. Then as well, you can upload different types of files. Those will read and give you data from that object, reading documents, specifying within requirements of, even though if you're doing it within Navisworks, getting the read of the XML file. So if it adapts or aligns within the processes so that if you're using A, B, or C, you can just use Andiamo to read it. Can it export different files of types? I mean, as far as now it's reading from that one, but it can get into that type of functionality. Since it's already creating from that type of objects, I will say that that will go from the DLLs answering to Moses' question. Then also for troubleshooting, knowing things about Revit, how they work around. Like if you find an error type and you're asking it, I mean, you're getting that query from there, consulting how you get research and suggestion summaries. Different types of questions within the extractors, which is another part of the Lib tools. So within having the extractors running, you have already the JSON data from that model, and that way you can query it back. And as well, working with multilingual support so that it's not just about working everything in English, but it can go within different types of languages. So how does that one integrate with the Lib tools? So the way it works is like, it has a dictionary of functions that it's integrated with the DLL and that can be connected. I think, yeah. So when it comes into the assistance, having the tool, the Lib tools, you can be asking for, I need some class detection. And even though now that you have enabled it within the DLL, then it's already using it the same process so that you can know, okay, it's running it on a regular basis, having the protocol of an object finding class detection within the objects. So that in that case, it knows already the JSON, it can read it, and you are nurturing your data sets so that when answers are getting prompt, they can be queried back. It's also asking for some recommendations of how prioritize. So because you have size and you have data from those classes, you can say like, okay, have to these spots, and within tools being upon document creation, they can be grasped on a workflow that speeds up the ones you want to fix. Then we have here some other example. In this case, it's running directly from the object. So it says like get clashes and yeah, get clashes between structural and MAP. The way Andiamo is working is finding the tools, running the protocol of the tool that it needs to run, and it's creating those clashes within the same setting. In this case, improvements on Andiamo on the connection might make it work on a different way, but it's part of the process. There. Yeah, and as well, the good thing with this one is that within the development, any other types of tools that are DLL based can also be called upon Andiamo so that they become part of the same type of workflow. So it says like if you ask for a line, it can just go from the tools, and the tools can also be reading so that they are creating within the objects. It will need to be said on this one that the type of tools will require to have the parameters properly set and the way of that to be understood upon which is the function it needs to be executed. And therefore, next steps going on this road path is that since we have now the classes and we have priorities, they will be some classes that might be a low type of level in the case that they are just needed to be finding their own way to be solved, or other ones that might need to be just queried on a document. So there are some other workflows that we're working with that are going to the future developments, but within those we can call Andiamo so that Andiamo can be running some creation objects. So in this sample, we have it something like, yeah, we're asking from there to create conduits on the provide root and dimensions, and therefore they can be added upon finding the proper fit so that it goes into that one to avoid the clashes or as well to solve the files easily. So if we add those three components to the model coordination, we're having an increase in time and an efficiency on avoiding conflicts. So practical applications of chatbots, it's about troubleshooting, consulting, set standards, interpreting the model conflict report. As we have seen, following the execution of workflows using DLLs, predicting errors, integrations, and construction of the lifecycle retrieval. Yeah, this is another sample. This is sampled using Power BI and Force Viewer in the case of reviewing things on a web service, but still, those being as well part of a type of solution. I'm trying to see if there's any questions so far. So yeah, so just a general disclaimer, some of the features are still on development, but the good thing about that one is that within within the reviews or the things that are already being on the deployment side, they can get better. So then we have some other features I want to present. So we have working around as well with AI for analysis to transformation, and from that one being added, just talking a little about Mirar. Mirar is our solution for creating prompts from creating images from prompts. And as well, it goes from that one getting into objects being created from reality. So if we already have functions, we have elements being created, elements being working around, and visibility from those, they can get quite connected. We have a question from Josue. It says like, would be great if AI could give those clashes happen in a similar object. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of the algorithm on that particular tool, the tool from the class detection, is that if they're on the same spot, they will just become one, so that you're actually just having the incidences being multiple with a bigger size. Mirar is already available on the Autodesk App Store, so you can download it and review it. How does that one work? And you can start testing so that you can create some prompts as well. Some other uses of Mirar is like getting from the viewport, extracting and creating images so that it's using the lines and the settings so that it goes within a specific prompt. Some samples as well using a picture being changed by the prompt. Being improved by the render style or getting some other elements that can give you ideas of that one works. Within that one being Mirar, the second vessel for the AI tools, it will also get integrated within the other workflows. Another sample using a sketch type of element being created, render a model building, and then creating it so that it goes with different alternatives. And within the ongoing development is getting image extracted as objects getting integrated, and integrated objects coming back. So that's part as well of future developments, but still on the walkthrough. So there's the reference for Andiamo and Mirar. Can download and upcoming talks. So this is the first one. This webinar has been the first one of a series. So the second one will be about document creation, creating objects, getting that workflow, and adding functionality so that it gets connected to multiple tools. Is there any questions around? I think for my part, that will be it. Yep. So if there's any questions around any of the topics covered in today's webinar, more than happy to help.
I have a question from Moses.
Will Andiamo be able to suggest how to avoid clashes? Yes, I mean, I would say that part of that process needs to go upon, like, the bigger ones should get like in review type of mode. And as you're working on the walkthrough or using the workflow, what it can happen is that it's going to be saving how you are solving those clashes so that they get stored as well within your database. And that way you say like, okay, if the class is bigger than this, then the solution is to have it on a document. If the class is smaller and having just like 2 disciplines, then it can have it within this type of other type of application or other type of workflow. So enabling the streamline process for an AI perspective, all of those data needs to be gathered so that way it can start predicting some type of resolutions. So I think that one can answer your question, Moses.
Feel free to open your microphone in case you want to ask a question to Enrique directly. We have another from Josue.
Do we have to prepare our model? Josue says, like, do we have to prepare our model with specific parameters or criteria in order to get better results using this AI? Well, would you know, like, at this point, it's actually using the geometry elements from Revit. So as far as it's already been modeled, that will be the easiest way to work it around. So modeling properly, that will be the only requirement so that you will have elements with the proper size and the proper location. And as far from that one, unless you're having like objects that you want to find clearance or that you need to have like some requirements that might happen upon like, you know, like electrical ones that they need to be on a certain distance, that is a different type of clash, probably will need to have some specifics. But far than that, I will say that the use of technology needs to be as broad as possible and try to avoid as specifics, because otherwise it gets too complicated and too difficult to implement because it requires a lot of tutorials. Thank you for the question. So a question from James Ward says, like, you identify no-fly zones to prevent obstructions to maintenance. Oh, yeah. I mean, I will say that from that, you can use similar to the room structure. So you can have like a type of volume or a mass element that you wanted to avoid that to be crashing upon. So that you say like all the elements that go within this type of criteria, then they shouldn't have any object inside of it. And that way you can have obstruction type of clashes. So similar to that, it works within the rooms because you want to find elements that go out of the ceiling. And if they are lower than that, they should crash within a room. But I mean, what you're actually needing on that type of setting for the modeling part is that your room is properly modeled and the height is getting up into the ceiling. Otherwise, when you're intersecting, you won't have that proper data. But I think that that type of process is good because that way you're being consistent on the way of creation. We include, then from Michael, we include the obstruction areas in some of our families for this very purpose, to clash with other elements. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm mentioning, Michael. Thank you.
We have another question from Brandon.
Brandon. Yes, Brandon. This is like, does Andiamo recognize only native Revit geometry? In this case, it's the tool, it's the AvanLib tool that it's running within Andiamo. And the native tool, as far as now, it's getting Revit geometry and as well getting voids, because you can get those from the coding API. So The thing with that one will be like, if you are out of the ecosystem of Revit, you need to be on a different type of platform. But I will say that those type of services can go upon a type of Andiamo working on a web service, web platform. So I appreciate the time and effort for everyone being here. I hope this content was of value, and as well within that, like any way we can assist and we can help. All of these processes are set for that, and to enable that AI, it's like part of our day basis, because on that way we can just like get the advantages of it.
Thank you, Enrique, and thank you everyone for coming. We hope to see you soon.